Hello and welcome. South Korea is in turmoil as President Yoon Suk-yeol declares martial law, accusing the opposition of sympathizing with North Korea and controlling parliament. In our special coverage on Qnews, we will update you where we track the latest updates in South Korea as clashes erupt while the National Assembly votes to block the order. This political crisis threatens both domestic stability and economic confidence.
위협으로부터 자유 대한민국을 수호하고 우리 국민의
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has declared martial law in a late-night, unannounced address broadcast live, claiming he would eradicate shameless pro-North Korean anti-state forces. He said he had no choice but to resort to such a measure to safeguard the free and constitutional order, stating that opposition parties had taken the parliamentary process hostage, throwing the country into a crisis. The surprise move sent shockwaves throughout the country. Chairman of the National Assembly, Woo Won-sik, has called on the president to immediately lift the emergency martial law following the National Assembly's vote. Of South Korea's 300 National Assembly members, 190 were present to vote in the emergency late-night session, which took place hours after President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law in a televised address. All 190 members voted to block the move.
헌법을 대한민국을 지키셔야 합니다. 해가 때를 시작을 사시고 이곳 국회 앞으로 모여주십시오.
The main opposition leader Lee Jae-myung has stated that anyone acting under Yoon's orders or the command of martial law is breaking the law. The South Korean opposition leader spoke after Parliament voted to block the martial law declaration. All 190 members present in South Korea's National Assembly voted against the measure, declaring it invalid.
아유 자랑스럽냐 이 벌을 이 새끼들아.
According to Yonhap news agency, the main opposition, the Democratic Party, has urged the public to gather outside the National Assembly earlier. The Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung has called the declaration of martial law unconstitutional and stated that Parliament will attempt to nullify it. The declaration comes amid a disagreement between the President's People Party or People Power Party, the PPP, and the Democratic Party over the next year's budget bill. Under South Korean law, the government must lift martial law if a majority of the National Assembly demands it in a vote. For further analysis on the situation in South Korea, we are joined from Tokyo by the political analyst Satoru Nagao. Welcome to Qnews. Now, obviously there are many reasons that we can talk about why the president of South Korea has declared martial law, but I just want you to comment on the last piece of information we were talking about. If the Parliament or the National Assembly would vote against that order, what is the position of the president at that moment?
President focusing on the emergency power under the martial law to work the internal politics of the South Korea, but under the legal system in the South Korea. So that's why the currently the President's declaration to imposing the martial law is failed. But still, under the martial law, can the parliament work well? That is also the matter of concern. So that is a controversial point. Anyway, the current President Yoon is not popular, and many laws, including the budget, they cannot go through. President Yoon cannot show the enough power to work internal politics. So that's why the President Yoon focusing on martial law. But at the same time, the view from the current situation, not successful well.
All right. Obviously, you've said that this perhaps the disagreement is not really a surprise. However, the declaration of martial law has sent shockwaves across the country and even beyond the country. Why do you think the president is declaring martial law at that moment? And do you think he would succeed in actually nullifying the opposition?
General image of the martial law is if there is a very serious security threat, this is time President use the martial law. But under current situation, it is true that North Korea supports the opposition party, but at the same time, we cannot find something evidence South Korea's government faced a serious threat from the North Korea or other external threat. So that's why the current situation calls from the internal politics.
Right. The South Korean president, in his speech, in the broadcast, he claimed that he would eradicate shameless pro-North Korean anti-state forces. What does he mean by anti-state forces?
In the past, North Korea supports guerrilla against government in many places, and even if it is not easy to find such kind of case recently, still the North Korea support opposition party or North Korea support some anti-government group. That is true. But at the same time, compared with the past, internal politics of South Korea is stable recently. So that's why we cannot find something violent related incident supported by North Korea. We cannot find in South Korea so often. So that's why what kind of threat South Korea's government face now. I do not know, and many people around the world cannot identify.
All right. Now, let's go back to the martial law and the vote of the parliament. Now, of course, the parliament has to, when it votes, it has to send this decision to the president. Does the president, in that situation, have any kind of veto measure that he could take against the parliament's decision on declaring martial law is not legal?
Yeah, that is a problem because if the parliament oppose more than half of the parliament oppose President Yoon's decision, this means that this parliament, including governmental party, oppose president's move. So governmental party means that supporter for the President Yoon. So that is the reason this is serious for the president, I believe. But at the same time, the president is president and the parliament is parliament. So that's why this is not the prime minister, this is the president. So separated from the parliament. So that's why the president keeps their power and the parliament keeps their power, and that is a conflict, and international politics will not work just now, I believe.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for commenting on the legal and the international or the domestic the discourse. We can now talk about the possible ramifications for the political outcome from such decision, Mr. Setsuru. Now, what is the possible political outcome, perhaps first on the president, because his popularity has taken a dive, having been mired in several political influence and corruption scandals, and losing also the majority in parliament since April. What kind of political ramification could he face right now?
View from the internal politics, of course, what we'll do rely on the decision of the President Yoon. But internationally, image of the Yoon is declining because of his declaration. generally, a democratic country, especially stable democratic country, do not declare the martial law. And South Korea is a well-developed country, many people in the world believe. But to declare the martial law for the internal politics has happened, really happened. So image of the South Korea will decline. It is clear, I think. So compare with other country, Japan, or the European democratic countries, or the other Asia democratic countries, imposing martial law image is not good.
Okay, so it's not good for him. How do you think is going to play for the opposition party, the Democratic Party, after gaining majority in Parliament last April?
Yeah, last April the election has happened. Yes, opposition party got the majority, so that's why this is two powers. One is president, one is parliament. So opposition party elite. So because of the rivalry between two, internal politics is struck. So it will continue, and because of this, South Korea cannot show enough presence in the international stage or the internal stage also. So that is a problem they are facing.
I understand also that perhaps because the president has announced this through a broadcast that was very late at night, that perhaps what's happening right now is not really affecting people's lives, but come morning, people would be affected if martial law is still existing. How do you think this is going to play out in the morning, and how will it affect the people in South Korea?
Temporarily, it is true that South Korea's government will not collapse just now. But at the same time, President failure of the declared martial law is declining his popularity more. And at the same time, the parliament is also, indeed, they cannot show enough enough decision making to decide something because of the opposition party's demand is also something too idealistic, and I believe that this is connected with the North Korea too. So that's why both of the president and parliament are not a decisive factor to decide something just now. So that is stalemate, something cannot, simply said, it will not work anyway.
Okay. Finally, what do you think the U.S. position is going to be, given that you said that it's going to have something to do with North Korea, and it probably is going to be a regional or could have a regional impact later?
For the United States, South Korea should be the stable democratic partner for the United States. And in this case, for example, even if president power or parliament power do not show enough influence to decide something, still the South Korea is a stable country. That is good. But at the same time, declare the martial law is not a good image as a democratic, stable democratic power, and that is not good for the United States to cooperate. So U.S. will cooperate with South Korea, but U.S. will not cooperate with the internal political power in South Korea. So that is two different situations the U.S. need to face. And so U.S. declaration will be they will cooperate with South Korea, and they wish a stable democratic power, but they cannot intervene, something like that, I believe.
Well, thank you very much, Satoru Nagao, political analyst. Thank you for your insights and for joining us on Q News. Dozens of troops had entered the main parliamentary building have begun withdrawing after lawmakers unanimously voted to block the president's martial law decree. 190 lawmakers voted to overturn the measure. It is unclear what impact the vote will have on the martial law declaration. As mentioned by our analysts, under South Korean law, the president is obligated to comply with the vote.
이거 받으신 거예요? 네? 아, 네. 네, 지금 이곳은 이 여의도 국회 정문 앞입니다. 이 대통령의 비상계엄령 선포 직후부터 이곳 국회에는 시민들이 하나둘 모여들기 시작했는데요. 지금은 국회 앞도로가 이 계엄령 해제를 요구하는 시민들로 가득 찬 상황입니다. 이 시민들은 계엄령 해제라고 적힌 손팻말까지 들고 구호를 외치고 있는데요. 윤석열 대통령 퇴진을 요구하는 목소리도 나오고 있습니다. 그거 아직 시작한 거 아니었어요? 한 거 아니에요? 아, 네, 갑자기. 연결됐습니다. 소리가 아직 안 들려요. 지금 연결은 됐는데요.
Now, for more analysis on what's happening in South Korea, we are joined now from Cairo by the Asian affairs expert, Dr. Muhammad Salah. Welcome, Doctor. Now, obviously, we need to understand this impasse that perhaps the domestic politics in South Korea has reached right now. What is going to happen right now after the National Assembly has declared that the president's declaration of martial law is not legal?
In the outset, I'd like to welcome to you viewers. If we look at the constitution of the South Korea, the Article 72 says that the parliament can overturn the martial law, and now it's up to the President Sunko and the Ministry of Defense. In fact, media platform is talking now that the troops started to withdraw, and therefore they can to some sort of sort out the crisis through the voting of the General Assembly against the martial law. And we should decide that the governing party and the opposition that has more seats of the parliament have agreed upon that this martial law shouldn't last. Following 150 minutes of the martial law, the parliament had convened and 190 votes voted in favor of overturning the martial law decree.
Right, just to bring people up to date, because we were saying that troops have been withdrawing after lawmakers voted to block the president's martial law decree. Before, in Seoul, police buses had already begun to move in to block or barricade the entrance to the parliament building, as we have been seeing by the local broadcasts. Now, how significant is all this political turmoil right now in South Korea, Doctor? Because the president has been facing problems. He has been battling a series of opposition bills and motions which had sought to undermine his rule, according to many political observers. And since losing majority in the National Assembly earlier this year, perhaps he has not been able to do what he intends to do politically and also legally.
Go back to the backgrounds. A few months in the past, in the early April, the opposition had the majority in the National Assembly, and the governing party was defeated. And hence, we should also mention the disagreement by the president and between the opposition as well as between the governing party. Initially, if we talk about the disagreement between the president and the opposition, we will find that the First Lady has several problems related to the interventions of local elections, and that has a relation with the governing party that was or intervened in nominees of the parliamentary elections. On the other side, there was a narrative saying that using some of the poll centers for the president to gain the votes during the elections of 2020, that to increase his popularity, at least during the parliamentary elections. From the other side, on the level of the opposition, to find that there's a case or reports talking about the manipulating and some names in the stock exchange that led to open investigations, never resulted anything, and the president of South Korea has shown in the press conference previously apologizing the crisis made by his wife. But in the meantime, that saying that facing the fabricating news at the end of the past November, we're talking about the last week, the opposition was intended to isolate or to change three of the public prosecutors that they were trying because of following the investigations with the First Lady of these problems, and the opposition intended to present a draft to dismiss the president of the community and an expectation that he failed to provide documentations related to transfer of the headquarters, the Blue Office, to another headquarter. Therefore, we found that there is a disagreement between the opposition and the president, and also we see a disagreement between the president and the president of the governing party earlier this year, and this disagreement.
He also the leader of Yon's own party has called the declaration of martial law as a wrong move, and he said that he's going to block it. Obviously, now, what do you think is going to happen if when perhaps the parliament overrules the martial law? Because the broadcast obviously was very late at night. People were perhaps they were home. Some of them perhaps were sleeping. So it's not really affecting the social or economic life yet. What do you think is going to happen tomorrow morning in South Korea after all this?
Supposedly, according to the law or the constitution, that the Speaker of the National Assembly that issued this request, and it's been presented before the President and the Ministry of Defense, and supposedly according to the Constitution, that the martial law should be lifted based on the request of the Parliament.
But constitutionally, the President does have a veto vote, doesn't he? Does it really work in this situation?
I think regarding this matter, we are going to wait and see what the president would do. But
right.
let me reaffirm upon the indications if the government and the opposition have agreed, despite their political disagreement, that the martial law should be lifted, and so that what the president did was wrong, that will indicate that South Korea affirms the freedoms and that need to be prevailed, and the democratic transmission since 1980, which was the last mobilizations and that witnessed some of the protests between the people and the police during the demonstration in 2017, and there is a consensus within the South Korean community that the martial law shouldn't be implied upon them. In history, in 1980, that is still present in the memory of the people, and it's sort of a great controversy, but a great consensus within the society that there's no return of that form of rules.
All right. Let's talk more about the president's declaration, or the unannounced address broadcast live earlier today. He claimed that he would eradicate shameless pro-North Korean anti-state forces. He also said that he had no choice but to resort to such a measure to safeguard the free and constitutional order. And he stated that the opposition party had taken the parliamentary process as a hostage, throwing the country into crisis. What do you think of his speech and his reasons behind the martial law measures?
As I aforementioned in the beginning, that there's an agreement in a few months between the president and the opposition that had been ignited in the last July, and there was a hearing inside the National Assembly to dismiss the president himself, and the accusation of the liberals or the within the South Korea, that this trend is more tolerant to work with the North Korea, as it is the pro-North Korea, to explain in more depth Democrat presidents in different terms, such as Kim Il-sung and Myung-kyung, had in 1998 and 2002 and 2007, and the previous president had an agenda that has a more tolerance with North Korea. Therefore, the accusations from the far right wing, as they are anti-North Korea policies, that would reflect the state of the political polarizations during that time.
Thank you very much. That was the Asian affairs expert, Dr. Mohammed Salah. Thank you for joining us on Q News. South Korea's finance minister has stated that the government will deploy all possible measures to stabilize financial markets if necessary. And he said that in an emergency meeting with top economic officials in Seoul, or rather he said during that meeting, that the government will mobilize all possible financial and foreign exchange market stabilization measures, including unlimited liquidity injections.
나갔어요. 지금 라이브로 나가요. 라이브로. 선배 드려, 선배. 드렸어?
Now, for more analysis on the economic ramifications on what's happening in South Korea, we are joined from Beijing by the Senior Fellow Tahir Institute and Chairman of the Asian Narratives, Inar Tanjin. Welcome to Q News. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Welcome. Now, if you can just comment on or tell us how this disagreement between the president and the opposition party came about, because the declaration of martial law comes amid a disagreement between the president's People Power Party and the Democratic Party over next year's budget bill. So is it something that has to do with economic and financial measures in South Korea?
Well, yes, it does. Obviously, they're the opposition, but you start looking closely at this. Yoon, whose popularity has dipped below 20%, his wife is embroiled in numerous scandals. He has not been able to answer the questions. And so he's at a point now where he seems pretty desperate. This is not a disagreement when you declare martial law, and you can expect in the next coming days that there will be a move to remove him, impeach him for what was obviously a badly timed takeover attempt. In terms of business, if he's not removed, you can expect strikes to go on throughout the country. As your previous guest pointed out, there is absolutely no tolerance whatsoever for a return to the days of strongman politics and military rule. So at this point, people will wait and see, but the best thing for the Korean economy is if he was to go quietly.
All right, now, obviously the broadcast happens late at night in South Korea. People were not really expecting it. And obviously it's not really affecting people immediately because perhaps they're just at home. What were you going to see the next morning? How is this going to affect the people in South Korea in the next morning? How is it going to affect their lives? And what kind of economic ramifications perhaps are possible in the coming hours or in the coming days?
Well, there's going to be a call for investigation. As I said, and as your previous commentators has pointed out, the Korean people do not want a return to the days of Syngman Rhee. They rejected that. They put together a constitution that prohibits that allows the legislature to, in essence, say, no, we don't agree. His own party has said that what he's done is wrong. So at this point, it's a question of whether he goes and when. And given that both parties are now against him, he's alone and has no standing. So tomorrow you can expect outrage that he was trying to do this in the dead of night, in essence, to take over the legislature and prevent any action by them, by preventing them from getting into the House. They forestalled that. So there's going to be investigations. The question is, how deep does it go and how quickly does it go on?
How would the international community, including the United States and other major economies, perhaps respond to what's happening right now in South Korea, given that there are many allies to South Korea, and also given that the president has mentioned that he's facing pro-North Korean anti-state forces?
Well, that's as both his party and the other party, opposition party, have pointed out, that's nonsense. There's no imminent threat from North Korea. He's not talking about that. He's saying that there's within the country. Now, the question is, was the United States aware, was Washington aware of what was going on? Repeated calls by Reuters and also AP to the military command, which has 28,000 troops in the country, have gone unanswered. Meanwhile, the Biden White House says that they're in contact with him, but are not specifying what, saying vaguely that they expect a peaceful resolution. So there's going to be real questions of whether he was willing to act alone or he thought or had a direct uh, uh, permission from the U.S. to go ahead with this move. Remember, Yoon has been, as was put by one of the most conservative think tanks, the dream partner for Biden. He's agreed to almost everything that Biden has asked for in terms of military alliances against China, against North Korea, expanding the Indo-Pacific. So it's a real question of how close they were on this subject.
But do you think this is going to implode more regional challenges given the already internal and regional challenges in the region for South Korea?
Well, it's not just South Korea and it's not just the region. You look around globally. Every time somebody thinks they're going to lose, they start planting the seeds that the election was illegitimate, that the opposition somehow gerrymandered or fraudulently turned the election in their favor. This is undermining democracy everywhere. The idea that you can push people to vote for you through fear has consequences. It polarizes societies. And as a result, there's a fear and suspicion that the other side is somehow cheating. You've seen that in America. You've seen it South America, Africa. All right, now you're starting to see it in Asia. It's a virus, and until it's stamped out, no democracy anywhere is safe.
But are there economic consequences that we might actually expect given what's happening right now? I mean, there are reports now that the South Korean currency is perhaps facing problems. It's against the dollar. Do you think this is going to continue?
As I said, it depends on what happens tomorrow morning. If Yoon steps down, which is the right thing for him to do at this point, I think it will recover. Democracy will be seen, at least in South Korea, as in steady hands. There will be some Sturm und Drang in terms of what happens next in terms of the politics, but there has to be some sort of orderly transition. If he tries to hold on and maintain that he was just doing this for the good of the country and refuses to step down, I imagine that there will be strikes, a lot of political, perhaps an impeachment, whatever is necessary to try to get him removed. Obviously, there will probably be a criminal case at some point. If he wants to avoid that, he can. But if he continues, as I said, it'll be worse for him.
But legally speaking, he's been trying to act within his rights. I mean, yes, declaring martial law.
He has no rights. No, he has no rights.
Hang on. The Parliament here has declared that the declaration of martial law is illegal, and perhaps he would sign this declaration of the Parliament or this decision by the Parliament, and though he would still be within the legal discourse of the Constitution.
When both parties have agreed on that, he would face a situation where both parties would come together and try to remove him. As I keep pointing out to you, despite you saying that this is legal, I'm a lawyer, I understand constitutional law. I'm not familiar with Korean constitutional law, but I can tell you when the vast majority of the people do not stand behind this gentleman who is less than 20% in terms of his popularity, who has many baggages in terms of criminal activities involving his wife or allegations thereof, it is not foreseeable that the armed forces or the police will stand behind him. He is isolated. The question is, when does he go?
Okay, and when this happens, or if it happens, what do you think is going to be the choices for his party? I mean, what kind of political steps should they be taking if what you mentioned would happen?
I used to run elections in the United States. I can tell you the only way that they can survive is to separate themselves from him and to claim that they stood against their own party member when he tried to do something that they did not approve of and they thought was against the Koreans' interest. It's the only way they can emerge as a party that had some sort of backbone and virtue. This is something that would be admired in Korea. I don't know that it will get them back in power. The elections will be off for quite a while until they are started again. So it's just been a 2-year election now. We'd have to wait and see what the succession process would be.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. That was the Senior Fellow at Asia Institute and Chairman of Asian Narratives, Inar Tangen. Thank you for joining us on Qnews, and thank you for your insights. And this concludes our coverage for the night. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching. I'm Karim Hatton. Stay tuned always on Qnews.